you know, because we're in the stock business, but it seems like when everybody launches a new product, we're the ones who have to take and modify our product for it, because we're kind of like the housing for everything. So like, okay, we're going to make a new trigger. We don't care. We're just going to make a new trigger, and whatever dimensions they are, it is. And then the stock maker will just have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it. That is the nature of it. So this mini chassis allows us to iterate through these different, whether it's complete new rifles or little trigger modifications or bottom metal modifications, we can iterate through these much faster. If I were to, used to be, I have to make an entire new mold for a stock, and molds are expensive.
That's the most expensive part
by far.
By far of anything that you're manufacturing, by the way.
Molds are, if you can solve the mold problem, you win, and that's what we've been trying to do.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We got a special guest today, Ryan McMillan. You are the CEO of Grayboe Stocks. Grayboe. I'm sure if you haven't heard of them, then you haven't fired hunting rifles before, probably. To be fair, I think at this point. How's it going?
Good, man. How are you? Good to be here.
Living the dream. You know, it's well, now it's April, so it makes sense that it's going to be 90 today, almost. Right. But it's been 90 for 3 weeks.
It's been hot.
Yeah. And you live in Phoenix?
Live in Phoenix.
Live in Phoenix.
Suburb.
Hot as well, but you guys got a false fall recently. We got a bunch of rain this past weekend. I was in North Carolina, but we got a bunch of rain. But we've had 2 false falls already.
Yep. We get hot. We get hot. We get cold. We get hot. We don't know. Like our trees, our vegetation's confused. Right now.
I bet. Yeah. Well, there's not that much of it. Luckily.
Not that much. So that's why it's noticeable every time you get a false false weather shift.
Yeah.
You notice all the trees for sure.
Yeah, I said false fall. I guess this would be false spring.
False spring,
in this regard. So we're going to get into a bunch of stuff today. What are you were talking about the politics in Phoenix, though. What's it like there right now? Because it used to be, as you mentioned, kind of the last city that's Republican or conservative, or however you want to phrase it.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. I mean, it's so big. I live in the Northwest Valley. And
like up past Glendale and shit.
Yeah, I live in Peoria, which is
yeah.
So super conservative place. When Trump, both elections, we had miles long convoys of Trump supporters. I don't really know many liberals in that area. It's hard for me to believe because I've lived there my whole life, because I know the demographics around where I live, that the state's even close to being, purple, let's say. You never see, well, very rarely do you see any serious support for a liberal candidate.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, I don't know what Geigo is statewide, but he's as far as Democrats go, there are worse people out there, right? I mean, he seems like in the same way that there are California Republicans, he's almost, and then there's like New Hampshire Democrats as well, who are like, you can't talk about guns up there because people hunt and you'll piss them off. Arizona's got, or has historically had, kind of centrist Democrats when they do get elected, but there's some knuckleheads too. Like Mark Kelly's not a centrist; he's a fucking retard.
He claims to be a centrist.
He says that, but he's a gun grabber, so that's not centrist, right?
I feel for him a little bit. He's a former pilot, a military
NASA,
guy, an astronaut. But man, he's got caught up in this Trump derangement syndrome, and he's just saying some stupid things. And like if you're a politician and you're someone, a serious person, you rise above that. But he just hasn't been able to do it. You expect that from like a guy like Swalwell or Beto O'Rourke, but I don't know. I wouldn't
soft hand guys,
yeah.
I don't know what did Kelly, what birds was he on when he was active? I don't actually know.
I don't know. It
must have been something like serious. He wasn't flying C5s and shit, right? And then you don't go to NASA from flying a C5, I wouldn't think.
Don't know. I didn't even know. I only looked up, briefly looked up his career after I had heard that he was a pilot after he had been an astronaut. So I don't know much about him. He's relatively new as well, I think, in the Senate. So I don't know much about him. I just have started following him on Instagram because he's a senator, and I just kind of wanted to see what he was all about. I'm like, the guy's an astronaut, man. And then he just kind of acts just like every other Trump deranged Democrat.
Well, it makes you keenly aware of how, and who this may have always been the case. It's hard to say, you know. Like I tell people from time to time, look at how fake the news is now, and then apply that to history. That we might be in a pretty shitty situation historically speaking, like as far as accuracy goes. But I don't know, who knows if it's always been like this. But right now, I think we're living in the dumbest period in human history because there's so many smart guys. Like, he's a smart motherfucker. You don't get, I don't care how you feel about him politically, you don't get any billet at NASA without being exceptional, right? And still, and it's not just him, there's many smart people who are just like completely captured by political propaganda. Maybe it's always been like that, I don't know, but it seems like it's way worse now than it was when I was like in the 90s growing up, and then starting to pay attention to politics. In the early days, there was a lot more internal dissent from both sides. Like, if the Democrats try to do something dumb, the Democratic base would be like, no, that's dumb, and then vice versa. But now,
I think it has a lot to do with social media. Social media rewards, they reward conflict.
Yeah.
And so if you're not creating conflict, you're not rewarded.
Which is completely antithetical to normal life.
That's right. 100%.
And also, conflict in normal life is pretty rare. Like, most of the day is monotonous. Sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so it trains you. Social media trains you to be adversarial, because that's what drives viewership, and that's what drives your likes and your follows. So I think even a guy like him can get caught up in that, because the more people, more eyeballs he has on him, the more support that he can get, and then he can get reelected. I mean, at the end of the day, for a politician, it's about getting reelected. It's about survival.
So if we're it's a good kind of thought experiment, because if we're being trained that way to essentially, we have an adversarial relationship now with anything that we deal with on a daily basis that happens on social media. So all politics, which has not always been the case, that we were adversarial all the time about everything, pretty much any social issue as well. And then I would take it down even to like male-female relationships have now become adversarial, because it used to be an extreme minority position that and something that we didn't respect either, like other men didn't respect, for a man to have some measure of, I guess, failure with women for some time, and be like, they're all women are just this, or all women are just that. And you, like, it certainly was a thing when we were growing up. And you see that guy, and you're like, that guy's a fucking pussy. He's a loser, right? And now there's a very large swath of dudes who are just nihilists when it comes to male-female relationships. And I wonder if it isn't because of that, because they now have an adversarial relationship with the opposite sex and less communication with them as well.
Yeah. Well, I think social media, again, has pulled us away from reality and into this kind of digital world. And so I think kids are becoming, they don't socialize as well. They don't interact as well. They interact good on electronic media, but face-to-face, that's hard.
Eye contact.
And no way can you have a relationship like a marriage, let's say, with over text messages or over Snapchat, right? So,
well, they're trying.
They're trying.
In Japan, especially. They're like making sex robots and shit now.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's not great.
That's when you know we're getting close to the end.
Yeah. Well, so everything we're experiencing here is doubly bad there. You've got to keep a certain level of, I think it's, the birth rate's got to be 2.1 or 2.2 or something like that, right, to sustain humanity, because not everybody grows up and has kids, so you got to account for that. In the U.S. right now, it's like 1.8 or something, I think, and then in Japan, it's like 1.1 or something like that. So I guess if things stay the way they are now, there won't be Japanese people in 75 years. No new Japanese people will be born in 75 years, which is not great, obviously. But then, it's also nature. Sometimes shit happens. Like 99.9% of all species that have ever existed have gone extinct on this planet.
Yeah, I think we do too. And I think there's two ways that we go extinct. One, we kill ourselves. And two, we die of boredom or of lack of interest. That's my take on it.
Well, you're a heady dude, I guess, in a lot of ways. But before we get too far down that road, let's look back at you a little bit. So you grew up in the Phoenix area. Mm-hmm. What was that like back in the 80s, I guess?
Well, I didn't know anything different. But looking back on it, it's weird because it was like the newest city in the United States. And so nobody's from Phoenix. Everybody you talk to was in the military, made a lot of friends from a lot of different places. There's a lot of history in their cities. We have none in Phoenix. So it was it was a great life for me, but it seemed more sterile, I would say, than most other people growing up in a more historic, especially the cities on the East Coast. But I had a great childhood. Overall, I had a lot of great friends and played sports and was, I enjoyed it for the most part. When I was younger, I was a little hefty, so I got made fun of a little bit, but that was good for me. Thinned out as I got into high school, and played sports and was good at that, and decided I could have played college sports, but I just decided I was ready to become an adult, I think, and so went off into the working world, not like a serious career, but I wanted to work and kind of make my own living, and I was just eager to do that, and so that's what I did for a couple years before I went into the military.
What were you doing?
Right after high school. Mm-hmm. So I picked up golf balls on a golf course, and the little vehicles that you drive around. And then I got promoted to like working on the range, like picking up golf balls on the range. So I wasn't in the cart anymore. I was on the range. And then I kind of moved into being a valet. And then I became a bellman. So like
this is all at the course? Or like
two different hotels, but basically kind of close to each other. And I just, so I started working at the golf course. It was a hotel golf course. And so I kind of started understanding how the hotel thing worked. And so I kind of moved my way up. And once I was working on the golf course, I decided like, I'd like to go try to be a valet. They make more tips. I knew how hotels worked at that time. So went over to the Biltmore, which is like one of the, the fanciest, hotels in Arizona, built by Frank Lloyd Wright, and was a bellman there. A valet, and then worked my way up to a bellman. Made pretty good money, actually. So. And
then you joined the Navy. So
yeah,
that's the natural progression.
Yeah,
obviously.
Totally. That's a totally normal way to do it.
What made you decide to join the military?
I don't know exactly. When you're young, you have all these things pulling at you. You want to become a man. You want to prove yourself. My dad and I didn't have a great relationship. Probably had something to do with it. I think I had something to prove. I think that's what it came down to. And I was also going to school. I was working going to school at the time, and I was pursuing a physics degree. And I also at the same time I had this kind of like academic minded interest, and I also had this like kind of masculine, let's go do something hard. And ultimately the masculine thing won at the time, and so I ended up enlisting in 2000 and going right, had what's called SEAL Challenge, and that basically allowed me to go to boot camp, A school, and then right to BUD/S.
As opposed to what, like going into the fleet and then coming back?
Yeah, normally if you don't go in with some kind of program or some kind of contract, you go right to the fleet, and then from the fleet you can try to get to BUD/S. You have to go to your CO on the ship or whatever and like try to petition to go to BUD/S. But from time to time they'll have certain programs that you can actually sign up at the recruiter and saying this is what I want. And the reason why they do that is because the Navy needs people, right? And they need people in really crappy positions that they can't fill.
Sure, yeah.
So they had these 8 really crappy rates that they were like, okay, well, we'll give you a slot in BUD/S, but if you fail, then the next 4 years are basically ours in these 4 crappy positions, like bosun's mate and all the crappiest things, scraping paint off the side of a ship.
What the hell is a bosun's mate?
You scrape paint off the side of a ship. You do you're like the janitor of the ship.
Yeah. I don't know much about SEALs, actually. Certainly not as much as I know about the Army. if you're a special forces, you go down one path or another: weapons, engineer, medic, or comms, and then so on from there. I think there's intel now, but it's like you got to be senior, I think, to do that at some point. But is it the same for the Navy? I know there's corpsmen, but then on a SEAL on your team, do you have certain specialties, or how does that work? I actually don't know about that.
So in BUDS, everybody one of the things that they talk about, the reason why, kind of a feather in the cap, is that all the SEALs go through the same training. All the potential SEALs, future SEALs, go through the same training. But officers, enlisted, doesn't matter. And there's no specialty. Like you're not doing corpsman work there. You're not.
So the MOS is all the same. It's just SWO or whatever the fuck.
Now it's SO.
SO.
Used to be you didn't even have a SEAL rate. You were your rate of the Navy, the Navy rate that you signed up in boot camp.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I was an OS, operations specialist, but I was still a SEAL. And to advance, I had to take the OS test. They changed that since then. So now it's SO, special operator. And now you take the test to advance. You take a SEAL test. But once you got to your team, as a new guy, you got no good schools. You'd go to some schools, maybe comms, but you'd go to like the shit schools.
So it's less about having a specialty and more about what opportunities you've had to go to school so far.
Yes. It's all about school opportunity. And so as you progress in your career, you get opportunities to go to better schools, and your senior leadership dictates what schools you get to go to.
What kind of schools did you want to go to? I mean, the breachers course is fun, because you get to blow shit up. Dive school's fun, but it sucks, right? But the Army dive school, I'm told by everybody that's ever been to it, is the most difficult school in the U.S. Army. I don't know if that's true for you guys as well, but
well, we did all of our diving in BUDS. There's not an extra school we go to.
Oh, I see. Like I guess you guys don't do that stuff, but there's an extra A school for like people that do underwater welding and all that bullshit, right?
Yeah, but we don't. So our schools, it's basically two major paths: breacher, sniper, and you don't have to, but most people stick to that area. So breacher is kind of at the top of the pyramid on one side, and sniper's at the top of the pyramid on the other. And most of other schools that you get into revolve around that. So there's the two main differences. But there's guys who crossed over and are breacher and sniper qualified. You're in long enough and you have enough time, you're going to go do those schools, and you're going to have qualifications. But ultimately what happens is you get to your team. Let's say you have breacher and sniper qualifications. You get to your team and you pretty much have to pick. You have to make a choice, like, where do I want to sit? Because we call them task units, but there's 32 SEALs broken up into 4 units, right? So guys of 8. We had 2 assault units. We had a recce team, which is the sniper team, and then we had a mobility team, which was the team who was in charge of making sure all the driving. And so the assault teams were basically guys going in doing direct action missions. Snipers were in charge of any sniper operations. And now if we had one major mission that was like it was involved all sniper stuff, the assault guys would go help, and maybe some of the assaulters who are sniper qualified pick up a gun and go, but for the most part we tried to keep it pretty segmented. When we were in, say, Iraq, I was on the assault team. When we were in Iraq, most of everything we did was assaulting, I would say. Snipers were just support. So we were kicking in doors and doing kind of SWAT team stuff and going in and getting bad guys. And so that was an assaulter heavy deployment. Whereas some of them, you do more sniper operations. Second deployment, I deployed as a sniper, and we did a couple sniper operations. But by that time I deployed my second time, the government had gotten involved, and we were doing 1/10 of the amount of operations in 2006 as that we did in 2004.
Why?
All the restrictions that they put on you, and basically one of the big ones was that you can't go on an operation without an Iraqi soldier. And so trying to find an Iraqi soldier. So yeah, you could literally,
especially that early. What the fuck?
Yeah. That was the biggest hindrance we had. We had others too that they involved themselves in and ended up hurting our ability to do our job, but that was the biggest one. If you had like time sensitive intel to go get a target, you had to go find an Iraqi soldier, or you couldn't go.
Jesus Christ, that's stupid.
Yeah.
We only took, I was in the 82nd. I think we only took, Iraqis with us on assaults one time, and it was a not a great situation, obviously. Like, we're flying low in a Black Hawk, which at night in Iraq, because of those stupid power lines, is always not the best idea, but we had to do it because you got to stay low pro. And some asshole behind me, we're all sitting in a Black Hawk, some asshole behind me starts taking flash photography while the pilots are under nods. I'm like, what the fuck? I just grabbed the camera and threw it out the fucking door. Like, you're an idiot. What are you doing? They're like children. You know
they're like children. Yeah, I mean, one of the tasks that we had is we were a part of a kind of an adjacent to training some Iraqi soldiers when we went from Mosul, then we went to Baghdad and Biop, and in Biop, that's where a lot of the main stuff happened. So there was a lot of training that went on too. We were trying to train these Iraqi soldiers. We were actually kind of an adjunct to these South African guys who were like the main training, but we were using these guys to help us support these Iraqis. And I just remember thinking to myself, these guys are the biggest pieces of shit on the planet. Like, you know, maybe they're good humans, but they are totally useless as soldiers. Totally useless. I remember there was they requested they had to have 10 days off a month. 10 days off. In a war, 10 days off a month, and that was the way they...
That's very European of them.
Yeah. And they claimed, we're not workaholics, and we want to spend time with our families and our brothers or whatever. And okay, so that's cool. And there's not much we could do about it.
Yeah. I mean, regulation typically is dumb, whether it's economic or in the military. It's funny, from one of the Call of Duty video games, one of the cutscenes, the guy says, he's bitching about command, and he says, you can tell us where and when, but don't tell us how, right? We're the experts at that. And that's really good advice. If you're somebody that's like graduating up the chain of command a little bit, that should always be in the back of your head. Like, why the fuck would you try to tell them how to do their job when they've trained so much? Thousands of hours, tens of thousands of rounds, and you're like, oh, well, maybe you should do it. Like, this is a good idea. Fairy nonsense. Yes. I met a couple of Iraqi SF dudes that were pretty competent. A couple, but the vast majority, even at that tier, were fucking retards. Man, they just had no skills whatsoever. What they didn't have was discipline, like mental discipline, especially. It's like that kid in right field in Little League that's looking at butterflies while the ball's flying over his head. That's pretty much what it was. And then they get startled into action, and their idea of 360-degree security is just to shoot in every direction. I'm like, oh my God, we got to get out of here. Whereas I never went to Afghanistan myself, but I know some straight-up pipe hitters that are Afghan Special Forces guys. At Black Rifle, we brought a bunch of them over here that they worked with at GRS and Ground Branch back in the day. And a lot of them still are in Salt Lake that work at fucking Black Rifle. Straight up pipe header dudes. Like, we trained with them up back here a lot just for fun. So it seems that, but they've been at war for since the 70s. Different, I guess. But the culture between Iraq and Afghanistan couldn't be more different from what I can tell. I don't know. Did you go to both?
I didn't spend much time in Afghanistan at all. I did most of my operating in Iraq. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a culture issue. I always thought that maybe it was because they didn't really value life as much as we did. I don't know if that's the case. I just think it's culturally they're just different. We're disciplined here. We get stuff done. That's how Americans are, and I just don't think the rest of the world's like that for the most part. And they clearly aren't. And I saw one in particular that I remember specifically in that group. He was a go-getter, and I'm like, where did you come from? Like, how are these 50 other dudes totally useless? Yeah. And you're the one guy who gives a shit. But they pop out like that somehow. And we worked with a guy. He goes by Johnny Walker. I don't know if you heard of him or not, but he's kind of become famous. He's retired now, but he was an Iranian as far as I remember, and he was a translator, and he worked for the United, special for the coalition forces. And he was in country when I was there in 2004. He was in country all the way up until a few years ago, and he basically worked with SEALs for over 20 years in that fight, and he's kind of like an honorary SEAL. I think they honestly gave him a trident. But yeah, you find those guys every once in a while here and there. They pop up and they're valuable, you know. We had 2 interpreters, both of them, one of them Iranian, the other one was like Iraqi, but he was like lived in America, and then he was contracting. That other guy's name was Sam. He got busted for colluding with the enemy. So you just never know who you're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, we had 2 of those. We had this woman, Terp, who was just selling us out the whole time. We found out later.
Yep.
But then she ran afoul of Jay Sholmati and got her head cut off, which is, you know, Muqtada al-Sadr's not a nice man, although he might be prime minister someday. So we'll see. He almost did it last cycle in 23 or 22, whenever it was. And we had a dude who disappeared one morning, and then we got shelled pretty hard with Katyusha rockets, like 30 of them on the side of our building. So that was a pretty good indicator that he wasn't on the level, or at least he knew that it was coming and fucked off. But we had some wild ass Terps too that didn't give a shit. Like, I'm sure you've ran into some of these dudes who you're looking around on the street and you're like, that pile of garbage looks suspicious, man. Let's go the other way. And they'll just walk up and kick the shit out of it. I'm like, that is not how you search for IEDs, my friend. Like,
that's why I always wondered if they just don't value life. I've been back and forth to the Middle East for business and over the last 20 years, whether it's in the military or business, and they just are different, man. I was in a car in Saudi Arabia, driving down, who knows, some freaking dirt road, and the people driving were driving 100 miles an hour on a 1-lane road, looking at their phone. I'm just like, I know there's probably some Americans that do that too, but there is a different culture over there and how they think about life.
Yeah, that's even when people die, whether it's weird, but it was always like an opportunity. Some kid, like in an area we know nobody was operating in, we get killed, and like, hey, you guys killed this dude, so we need money now. I'm like, that's weird. That's pretty weird. But whatever. Grifters. So how long were you in the Navy?
6.5 years. Yeah.
What made you decide to get out?
My time was not my own. And that was hard for me. I knew that once you re-enlist your first time, that puts you over 10. Has to, just based upon the way that time works. Minimum re-enlistment's 4 years, so I was at 6.5. I would have been at 10.5 after my second enlistment, and nobody gets out after 10. I mean, when I say nobody, generally nobody gets out after 10. And my question to myself was, do I want to do this for a career, or do I want to move on? And it became, my life was not my own. Your life is not your own when you're in the military. You do exactly what the military wants you to, no matter what. Like, there's very little exceptions to that, especially when you're at war. They don't care if you're getting married. They don't care about any of that shit. They don't care if you're having a baby. I mean, they do, but they don't. They do, but they're like, well, sorry, this takes precedent. We're at war. So I ended up making a decision to get out and move on. And
what was that like, the transition out?
It wasn't too bad because, my family, my grandfather started a business in 1973, and we had this family business in the rifle stock industry. And my dad, like I mentioned before, my dad and I never really got along, but I felt like I needed to go back and give that a shot. And so I did, and made it work for a little while until I ended up having to start my own business. But overall, as far as the transition, it was easy for me, actually. A lot of people say it was hard, and I feel for those guys, how, you go to war and there's all this adrenaline. It's like a drug, and it's, there's depression involved. I never felt any of it, honestly. I was happy to be out and moved on with my life. And so, yeah.
That's good. And then you worked with your dad for a bit before you got out, but then you wanted to do your own thing, I guess.
Yeah. Did
you finish your physics degree, or did you just?
I did finish it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there a specialty? I actually don't know how physics degrees work. For an undergrad, maybe it's just physics.
It's just physics. Yeah, it's just physics. I mean, the thing about physics is so complicated that you don't really get specialized at all until you get well into your PhD. And so
makes sense.
Yeah.
And that was before the Navy, right?
No, I finished after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How many years did you have finished when you went into the Navy?
I had most of my underclassmen work. So like I went back. The problem was it was years and years before I went back. So I had to refresh everything, right? Like math doesn't just stick around.
Yeah.
You know, you have to really relearn it.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to kind of redo some things as little as I possibly could, but I still had to redo some things. And I ended up restarting at like basically my beginning of my sophomore year. So I took about 3 full years to get finalize my degree, even though I had spent about 2 years before I went into the Navy, just getting some kind of like prerequisites out of the way. Most of the stuff that I spent time in before the Navy, getting classes, like those classes really didn't count for much. Just a few basic ones. So basically I had to do almost all of it. I mean, 3 years worth of work after I.
Was physics something you were always interested in, like as a kid and shit like that?
Not really. I was interested in sports, and when I got into college, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So I started taking some business classes, and then, you know, as a young kid, you know, you get interested in things like what you're going to do with your life through TV. So I was watching some TV shows. I'm like, man, this looks cool. Like at first I was like, I want to be in the FBI. And then
what was the FBI show that you liked?
No, I have to tell you. It's
okay. No, tell your story.
No, X-Files.
Oh yeah,
it's embarrassing.
Why is that embarrassing? It's one of the most successful shows of all time.
Yeah, but it's totally embarrassing. But yeah, so I just got into watching that, and then I was like, man, it'd be cool to be in the FBI. But then I really started digging into it, and I realized, no, FBI is not what I want to do. I wanted to be in the CIA. And then I'm like, okay, cool. What do I do? What degree do I need to get? And I realized I could get any degree I wanted. And I'm like, okay, so that easy and hard at the same time. Easy because like I can do what I want, but hard because like now I got to figure out what it is. Well, I was good at math in high school. And so I started looking into that, and I started taking some engineering classes, and I kind of just stumbled upon physics. I'm like, dude, I love this. So once I started taking my first physics classes in college, I just was like, okay, I'm changing my major. This is it. And so that's what I did. And then kind of back to the beginning is where I having these competing thoughts of like, do I want to finish my physics degree, or do I want to go into the military? And the military won out at that time. But I always had this, I will say this to this day, probably the thing I have the most passion about in my life has been physics. The reason why I never pursued it for a career is because as I got older and I got my degree as an older guy, I had a family at that time. To do anything serious in physics, you need a PhD. You don't make any money in a PhD. I had 4 kids, and it just financially would never have worked for me to continue to pursue that. Yeah,
there's no way. I mean, you're like most people in those programs are the only money they make is a TA. Like teaching the other classes, right? And then you got to get another job while you're trying to learn the hardest shit in the world.
Well, yeah, it's a PhD. You probably spend 80 hours a week just doing your PhD work, you know. And then I think they pay you like $20,000 a year. So it's nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it turned out I couldn't do it. So.
What type, like, I guess when you got interested in physics, because I am too, but more like astrophysics and stuff like that. I like space. I don't give a shit about. I certainly, having an interest in physics probably helped you at sniper school a little bit, right? Because
helped me dive.
Just not having to learn the simple trig and calculus problems that you need to learn to shoot well. It's probably a leg up, but they're not super complicated, I don't think.
No.
And then, you don't want to overthink that anyways.
Right.
But what was it about the physics you think, or what type of physics was it that drew you in? Because I feel like for me, I took a ton of astronomy courses that were completely useless over the course. I went to school for 8 years, and I took a bunch of stuff like that had no relevance to any degree that I ever had. My degrees are in like religion and like international homeland security and border security and shit like that. And they're like, "What's this?" Don't worry about that, little guy.
Yeah.
It's what was it for you, I guess?
I'm just deeply interested in how the world works, I think. And physics is the best way humans know to understand it. And so, interesting thing about, astronomy and cosmology versus, let's say, quantum physics is that quantum physics is the thing that everybody, when you get your physics degree, that's what everybody gets giddy about when they start to get into that kind of phase.
Yeah.
And quantum physics has a lot to do, I think, and has a lot to do with everything. So whether you're interested in astronomy or how little subatomic particles work, it all kind of works together. You hear this unified theory. Well, they're trying to figure out how gravity, which is Einstein's theory of general relativity, fits with quantum physics. And so those trying to match the big with the small, and everybody's pretty confident. I mean, it's one universe, so they have to work together. And so it's all one thing. It's just now we're not far enough along in our science to really understand how they work together. So we look at some things as huge, and then we look at other things as very small, but in all reality, it's all the same.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, the nature of reality is so much more bizarre than even the stuff that we make up, to be honest. It's and maybe that's just because our brains didn't evolve to think about it, I guess. But we're used to dealing with single digits to into the billions, maybe something like that, and even that's relatively new. But when you're talking about just the number of expected stars in the known universe, which is not even the full universe, you're talking about a 1 with 32 zeros behind it or some shit like that. Our brains can't. That's a meaningless number for like functionally speaking.
It might as well be infinity.
Yeah.
Might as well be infinity.
And then you go in quantum field theory, you're talking about the same but minus 32, right?
It's the opposite direction.
So it's like, what the fuck?
For sure.
Like we're living, and it's the same as, I guess you could say, to some degree, the visible light spectrum for human beings is so narrow. Like, what are we, like 20% of it, maybe? Something like that?
I'm not sure but the percentage, but I know there's a lot of light we can't see.
Yeah, most light we can't see. And all the radiation, we can't see any of that. Right. We can see the effects of radiation sometime, like when you see distortions in the horizon and stuff like that, or I guess technically the northern lights are the effect of radiation as well, but we can see the effects, but we can see the effects of wind too. You can't see wind. It's really weird to think about. So at some point, you're either a hobbyist as a physicist, which is what I am. I just like it. I think it's interesting, and or you find some practical application for it. And as you said, usually it involves years and years and years of sacrifice to get to that point. I've got a lot of friends who are physicists at universities and stuff like that, and that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And then I have a lot of friends who are, I guess a different type of physicists who work on everything from engineering to gun parts and stuff like that. And you have, I guess you kind of come from that to some degree because your grandfather was making stocks back in the day, and now here you are doing it. What was it that got? I mean, obviously you had some experience in it, so that makes it, practically applicable, I suppose. But what made you decide to get into Grayboe?
Well, my dad and I had started working together after I got out of the military, and spent about 8 years. We kind of created a business. We started building rifles. I mean, let me back up a second. When I got to the company, I was bored out of my mind. And when you're kind of like the son, it's not like they necessarily have anything for you to do yet. Like you're just coming in,
trying to learn the business.
Yeah, it's not like you're applying for a job and they have a job opening for you. Like you're kind of like you just get there, and then they didn't really have much for me to do. So I was just like, man, this sucks. So I was antsy. Just came back from being a SEAL. And was busy as hell then. And then I get to this place and I'm not busy at all. And I'm like, I'm antsy to do something significant. I'm 27. I'm like, let's go. And so I'm young and dumb and decided I wanted to kind of start my own business based upon these other businesses. And anyway, my dad and I ended up starting a business together, building the full rifles, and we did that for 5-6 years. Ended up selling the business, but at the end I think we sold it mostly because we just had a hard time working with each other. And, you know, it's okay. That's how it goes. It's hard working with family. But I had spent 10 years doing this at this point, and that was where my expertise was. And so I had some ideas on how to make rifle stocks better. I approached him and I said, this was after we had sold the other business. And hey, you know, like, I don't want to step on your toes or anything. I'd be happy to make you a partner in this. This is my idea. He was cool with it. Long story short, he didn't end up becoming a partner at all. The goal wasn't to be a competitor at all. It was to kind of work together, but it ended up being that didn't happen. And so we ended up going out on our own, and I've been doing that now for about 10 years.
What was, I guess, to me, a business is finding a gap in the market or a mistake that somebody's making and fixing it and putting out either a product to a certain niche of people who didn't have it before, a new product, or a better or a better one, like one that's better. And I feel like if you got into this because of, I guess, interest in physics, it's probably the latter. Like you wanted to make a better version of what already existed. So what were the most common mistakes that most rifle stocks have, or even historical stocks have made that you were trying to improve on? Because you had some practical experience actually shooting the gun and anger at that point, right? Which is quite a bit different than just being a hobbyist.
Yeah. The biggest thing was, from a manufacturer standpoint, make the rifle stocks easier to build. Make the process easier to make stocks. It was very complicated and cumbersome to make rifle stocks.
Why?
Well, have you ever heard of like a hand layup process? Like carbon fiber.
Yeah. As opposed to like a gun. Like there's a bunch of different ways to do fiberglass, for example. You can there's fiberglass chop. There's laying panels. There's injection moldings that like pull the urethane, or not urethane. What is it? Whatever it is through. So is that what you mean? Yeah.
So the way my dad was doing it was hand layup, which is one of the most cumbersome. And you're right. There's a number of different. Like transfer molding. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but really the only way to do a stock effectively at the time, or how everybody was doing it, was hand laid up. It was the most complex. And I saw a better way to do that, kind of angling towards how injection molding works with plastic, is how we could figure out how to do that same thing with this epoxy material. So I saw that as one piece from like an internal perspective. From an external perspective, from the customer's perspective, it was very complicated and difficult to order stocks. You had to call somebody. The person who was on the other end of the line had to know what they were talking about. You can't just hire somebody you have years and years of experience to understand because there's dozens of different rifles out there, hundreds of different barrel contours. You have to know all of this so that when the order is placed, the machine shop, or the shop that's making the stock, can actually produce the stock with the right configuration. And so that was a big problem that got wrong. That was wrong a lot. Not only was that a problem for the person taking the order, but trying to relay and gather the information from the person who was actually placing the order was also as complex. So the goal is to simplify everything. And it would take me probably 15 minutes to go through every detail of that. But the bottom line is, to simplify stock making means to simplify the features, and then simplify the manufacturing process. And in simplifying the manufacturing process and streamlining that, you make stocks a lot cheaper as well. You can still have high quality stocks, but you make them in higher volume and you make them cheaper. And for the customer, if you make it easier for them to order, first of all, it used to be where you had to call in. If you start to make it easier, then you finally get to like they can actually order online and get their order right. And that starts to simplify. And as you know, modern day now, people don't want to talk on the phone to people. They want to go online and they want to order, and they want their order to be right when it gets to them. And so that's been the goal since the beginning. And we've made tons of strides. As a matter of fact, we're launching a product next month that basically completes that entire cycle. We've been working for 10 years to work through those two problems, from the customer standpoint and from the manufacturing standpoint.
Do you want to talk about that new product, or is that close hold? Yeah, tell me about it.
No. It's generally what's called a mini chassis. So mini chassis are the part that the rifle sits on. You actually can have a mini chassis. It's only, maybe 10 inches long.
You're talking about the metal insert into the stock? I didn't even know that's what it was called.
Yeah. So generally call it mini chassis minus, but the metal insert into a stock. But the key to that is that those are around here and there. But the key to that is making it that the outer geometry universal, so that you can design and build stocks for that outside geometry. So
almost the same way that you use different flash hiders to screw any can onto, basically, right?
Yes.
Okay. How has no one done this yet?
Well,
I guess you guys have been working on it for 10 years.
Well, we haven't been working on that for 10 years. There's other things that were leading up to that, like universal barrel channels and making the stock more universal. I would bore the crap out of everybody if I got into the details. I don't want to do that. But as far as the mini chassis is concerned, the challenge with that is every single rifle out there is so different. The geometry is so different. Being able to bring in all of these different rifles, making sure that you have the outside geometry of the mini chassis in its dimensions or can accept every single rifle out there. Because the goal is these mini chassis fall into the stock and get bolted in. And you can, if you have a Remington 700, if you have a Ruger American, if you have a Savage, it doesn't matter. Any of those can be bolted in. But that outer profile of the mini chassis has to be able to accept all those, because those get machined at a machine shop. And so it's not, on the surface, it doesn't sound like a hard concept, but it is, in practice, it is a lot more challenging than it sounds.
What was the most challenging part about it? I mean, modularity, when you have dozens of different manufacturers of one of the component parts, is always going to be an issue. It's why when a tech company, when Apple comes out with a new OS, or when they come out with a new phone, they send the phones to the bigger app developers, so they can start actually testing their products on the thing before it. But Remington's not doing favors for third-party companies because they sell their own stocks, right?
Right.
So now you've got a particular challenge that you got to deal with. Luckily, new rifles don't come out that are mass produced, don't come out that frequently, but still, like, you've got to do all that work on your end, because you're not going to get any help from that.
Nobody cares about. We're the only ones who care. And new triggers come out, and it seems like, and because we're in the stock business, but it seems like when everybody launches a new product, we're the ones who have to take and modify our product for it, because we're kind of like the housing for everything. So like, okay, we're going to make a new trigger. We don't care. We're just going to make a new trigger, and whatever dimensions they are, it is. And then the stock maker will just have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it. That is the nature of it. So this mini chassis allows us to iterate through these different, whether it's complete new rifles or little trigger modifications or bottom metal modifications, we can iterate through these much faster. If I were to, used to be, I have to make an entire new mold for a stock, and molds are expensive.
That's the most expensive part
by far.
By far, of anything that you're manufacturing, by the way.
Molds are, if you can solve the mold problem, you win, and that's what we've been trying to do. And now my goal since the beginning, I know this doesn't sound like much, but one mold per model. What does that mean? Like, every time I launch a new product, a new model, I only want to have to make one mold. In the past, there was all these different configurations, different types of bottom metals, different barrel channels, different rifles, like a Savage versus Remington. All that needed its own molds. So the goal was to iterate through making changes to where you only need one mold per model. And literally, when we launch this new system, that will finally come to fruition. And what the great benefit for us is, that's kind of like a side effect, is that now we can launch so many more product. Instead of having to make all these molds for all these variations, we can literally launch 5, 6, 7 new products a year, because our speed of making molds is the same, but now we're making a new model every time we make
Well, if you're making custom stuff for any industry, and when a lot of companies went out of business because of this, but when online ordering became easy to do, and your custom stuff was like, as you mentioned before, on either side of that conversation, if the sales rep or the customer didn't know specifically, then you start incurring all these ancillary costs for returns and restocking and all this other bullshit. I've seen companies go out of business because of that, because they turned that channel on before they were actually ready to service that, to be honest. And it's a fucking shit. And a lot of companies historically have shut that down, right? Like, they shut down their online ordering or they institute policies of no returns and stuff, which is not good business technically, but because stuff goes wrong sometimes. But what's your option there? You know what I mean? If you're not ready for prime time that way. So now this new product, does it have a name?
We're flirting with some names of the system itself. We don't know yet. We probably won't launch it till the end of the month, maybe beginning of May. Right now, one of the leading names is an acronym called the IRIS, Interchangeable Rifle Stock Inlet System. It's dumb, but the acronym is what matters. It needs to be catchy. It needs to and then when you read it, it needs to tell you what it is. But yeah, that's the leading name we have right now. Whether we launch it with that, I don't know.
And if I've got like a Gen 2 Ruger American or a Remington, whatever, Savage American, I can drop my barrel and trigger into that bitch. Basically.
Yeah. So what'll happen is, like, let's say you go to, like, one of the reasons why I'm out here is because I'm going to visit Bass Pro, and we're talking about maybe putting these stocks in their. So you go to Bass Pro.
Did they make you go to the middle of fucking Missouri for this meeting?
I got to go to the middle of Missouri after this.
That's the next one. Yeah.
I can make my way up north through Texas into Missouri. You walk into Bass Pro, and Bass Pro has these mini chassis sitting on a shelf separate from the stock, and in the stocks, however many models we make, the stock sitting on the shelf, and you say, hey, Bass Pro attendant, I've got a Ruger American, and I really like that style stock right there. One of our stocks is called the Core. I really like that one right there. He takes the Core off the shelf, he takes the mini chassis, he puts the mini chassis in there, bolts it together, and then you have a stock, and it's going to fit. Because now, like I said in the beginning, when 20 years ago when I started this journey, or less than 20 years ago, you basically needed an expert to try to take the order, and the customer had to pull out his calipers and all this bullshit. Now you need to know what action you have, like basically what's your rifle manufacturer and what caliber. Those two things will get you the stock that you need. And that is huge. That's 10 years worth for us. It's 10 years worth of work.
I mean, nobody else has ever done it. So far as I know. Not
to this level. There's other companies who have made strides in this direction for sure, but not to this. This will be a new level.
And it's whether I've got Christensen or Wilson Combat or anything, right? Doesn't matter.
Because like a Christensen, for instance, is a Remington 700 clone.
That's true, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So like a Wilson Combat, I'm not super familiar if they even have a bolt gun, but like
they've got a NULA, it's called, or something like that. NULA, N-U-L-A, I think is what it's called. I don't remember. It's I don't know if it's any good or not. It's just like a 308 bolt. So who knows? I mean, it's not the most complicated weapon in the world. You need a heavy barrel and good metal and shit like that. But anyways.
Well, most of these companies are making Remington 700 clones that are coming out new now. But there are still tons of legacy companies like Howa, Savage, Ruger, Colt, CZ. They have all their own inlets, all their own models. So we have to account for that. And so it simplifies it. And especially for the customer, you come in, like, there are going to be some, like, you come in with a Mauser 98. Right now, we don't have that. There just has to be just enough for us. Like, I wouldn't even say a whole lot, but like we've got to get like 25 to 50 potential sales a year for us to make a new mini chassis. The mini chassis is so much simpler to make than a whole new stock. All we got to do is machine it, but we have to have some potential business there for us to even think that it's reasonable for us to carry something like that and spend the money on inventory.
I mean, that's not even that much revenue to justify, to be honest. So it's a pretty low cost.
It's a low cost, and there's a ton of.
What do your stocks cost? Like $7,000 to $1,000, somewhere in that range.
Yep.
That's pretty reasonable for a fucking nice stock, to be honest.
Well, and you think about what the mini so that's the mini chassis cost of the stock. Most of our stocks now are even less than that. But you put the mini chassis in there and they go up. But what people don't realize is that you have to buy a bottom metal anyway, and bottom metals are $200. So like you basically just add $200 to the price of your stock. And so we're super competitive with that. Like, you don't need anything else. You buy the stock, let's say like the Core is going to come out, pretty advanced stock, come out for $9.99 or something like that. You don't need anything else. You don't need to buy a bottom metal, nothing. Like, you've got everything you need right there. So
that's pretty nice. Aside from this new product that's going to provide, ease and modularity, I guess, what would you say it is about your guys' stocks that sets you apart? What's your value proposition to people?
Well, our design, like, we've been designing stocks. We know what people want. We know how to design them to make them. We know how to design them, for the right features. So as from a customer standpoint, the design is important. Now, there are a lot of other companies out there who design good stock, so we're not the only ones by no means, but we have good designs, we deliver, we have really good customer service, and we're easy to deal with. We're just really easy to deal with. And I think of all the things that of all the compliments that we get, the one that's the most common over time is that we have great customer service and we're easy to deal with. So, especially when you're a new business, when you're trying to develop new product and make a new product and you're a little bit new at it and you're making mistakes, you got to do something well, and that's treat your customers good.
Sure.
And so we've always really tried to make sure we don't even ask you if your stock has a problem. I don't even care if we are going to replace it. I don't care if it's 4 years old and you bought it secondhand. I don't like it, but we do it because it's not worth getting a bad reputation. It's worth keeping a good reputation. So we've made that commitment and we've kept it for 10 years. We do whatever we have to keep a happy customer.
You said the right features, aside from the obvious like ergonomics and performance, and then the most obvious, which is looking cool, because the sixth principle of patrolling, as everybody knows, is you better fucking look cool while you're doing it. What would you say are the right features for a stock?
Every stock, you're going to end up with 8 models. If you want to capture every single market, every single sub-market within that bolt gun world, you're going to have 8 to 10 stocks. And so every single stock requires a different set of features. So let's say your base hunting stock has no features, but the whole game is lightweight. How light can you get that thing? And so the value proposition of that stock is weight and price. And so you always balance these weight, price, features. Like they're all balanced throughout your line. You might have one stock that's got everything on it. It's the highest priced. Yep. Maybe someone can't afford that. On the other hand, you've got a stock that's a base model. It's a little bit cheaper. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it's that entry stock that the kind of the younger guy can get his hands on because he's got enough money to be able to buy that. So I'm not sure I even answered your question.
No, I mean, yeah, certainly. There's always if you're going to be running around out in the mountains somewhere, you don't want it to weigh too. I mean, you got to carry what you pack, obviously. And then there's, I guess different shooter preferences. Having being able to get your eye line right behind your glass is always important. Like you want it to be as natural as possible, and then having a lot of your stocks actually, you have the ability to adjust the cheek stock weld there, which is that's always nice, right? But some people don't give a shit about that,
right?
Some people use low pro fucking glass and they want to have their face buried down in it, and if that's how you shoot, that's how you shoot.
There's still a lot of old school guys out there who are buying stocks, who want the base model,
it's a straight stock,
it's a straight comb, like swoop back, grip, and they're still out there. They exist. And then there's the guy who wants the fully decked out, every bell and whistle. And so there's like I said, you're going to probably have 8 to 10 models, probably 3 tactical models, a base model, a mid-range model, and a super high-end. When I say tactical, that's kind of competition tactical. And then there's, you could probably end up with 4 or 5 hunting stocks because there are enough variations within hunting that you would sell all variations. Yeah.
And you guys, I think every stock you guys sell, I've never seen one without it, but you have the Grayboe recoil pad on there, which is the most comfortable thing that you're going to get behind, in my opinion.
Sure.
At least one that's on every model of a certain brand of stock. I haven't seen anybody do it as good as you guys do. It's there's a lot of different types of stocks out there, and there's plenty of good stuff out there, to be fair, but your guys, I don't know what it is about it that's so comfortable. It's like multiple layers. I'm shooting like a 700 and I'm barely feeling it.
We spent a lot of time on that pad. A lot of time to develop that pad. Our goals were to make it lightweight, to make it cheap, and to make it comfortable. And I know like that word cheap doesn't sound great, but
inexpensive is a better word.
Inexpensive because one of the things that we were running into is we do a lot of work with rifle manufacturers, and we're selling thousands and thousands of stocks to these guys, and every penny counts. And one of the things that killed us was the cost of these pads. Like we'd buy pads from a couple companies, they're $10 a piece. I'm like, that's like, it's a huge cost.
And the quality is just okay for that price too.
And they're complicated to install. There's all kinds of issues. So we worked our butts off, and you think maybe that's an easy thing to do. It was not an easy thing to do. We probably worked for 4 years, iteration after iteration, trying all kinds of different silicones and foams and different things. And we finally did land on something, and we finally kind of perfected the process. And now we got it. We have this very inexpensive, high quality, soft, lightweight pad. And it's like, if it hit every metric we wanted, but it took a long time to find the right combination of materials and process.
Are you guys making it yourself?
Yeah.
What would you say what's the problem? Just finding all the materials, or what was it?
Well, it's a combination. The problem is layered, because once maybe you find the right material that you like, the softness, but actually creating a process around that oftentimes doesn't work for many potential reasons. One, like this really nice soft silicone, well, you look at it, it takes 24 hours to cure. I'm like, well, that's out the window. Or there's other issues, like you find this foam, and the foam's pot life is too short or too long or whatever. There's just so many little variables that you have to just really work your way. So there is a possibility you find the right material, and you think, okay, this is going to work in our mold system. And you have to create a mold system. And then you start trying it, and then there's just something you couldn't foresee is not compatible. The material somehow in some way is not compatible. You cannot create a process around it due to some restriction that you have, and you just start over. Yeah,
it's crazy, because sometimes some engineering procedures just don't scale.
That's right.
Maybe there's a little extra piece. No matter how you make the mold, there's always this little extra piece on there, and somebody has to manually take it off, and that's adding cost. And now I'm not making money.
That's right.
It can be that stupid sometimes, to be honest.
Well, yeah. I mean, your goal is to be able to turn these things as fast as possible. So if you're
without sacrificing the quality of it, right? Otherwise you're fucked. So
yeah, exactly.
It's a challenge.
And so, like I said before, you've got a pot life that's too long, or a cure time that's too long. Well, this is the material I want. And then you look and you're like, this material only comes in this variation of pot life, right? And pot life and cure time, and you're like, well, I can't deal with that. I've got to have a quicker turnaround. And so you just search and search and search, and eventually we've stumbled on the right combination of things.
Where did you start in that? I'm just curious where you started in that process. Was it like, I've got this, I know how much energy this weapon is producing, so I've got to redistribute this amount of the energy through a couple of different layers of material, probably. Did you start there, or was it just like the material that was easiest to source, or what was it?
No, we really started with the material. Honestly, it wasn't that complex. I wasn't trying to understand the physics behind it.
Could you see some complicated pads out there that have like little springs in them and shit? It's not that bad, man.
It's not.
People, we grew up shooting these rifles that had it was just wood.
Yes.
And it sucked sometimes after a day of shooting, but it's not.
Well, and the pads we were using before were rubber. I mean, they're not super
just hard
comfortable.
Ass rubber, yeah.
So I'm like, and what we knew when we got far enough along with this, we could vary the material formulation to where this particular material that we use, because there's a certain volume, if we added a little bit more material, the stiffness would go up, the density. So like it wouldn't compress as much. So we knew that we could actually vary that in the kind of in the final stages, based upon how much material we actually put in this fixed volume.
This is how people are making beds now, by the way.
Yeah.
It's like layer, 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 layer. So it's like hard layer, soft layer, hard layer, soft layer. So you get the support, but you don't get what you're talking, because there is a diminishing returns, not the right word, but if you put too much of a soft material together, just think of paper. A ream of paper is quite a bit more solid than a single sheet. And that happens with every material, no matter what it is. That's why certain types of steel are stronger than others.
Yeah.
So that's pretty funny.
Yep. So yeah, you learned a lot from those. You spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
But
the R&D on that is wild.
It is. It's a lot of times you don't factor in your own time. But man, if I could factor in my own time and how much time I spent on that,
yeah, you may
it'd
have
be lots of money.
Charge more for your for your stuff at that point.
Yeah.
What would you say the most common product you guys sell is?
The Phoenix 2 is by far and away our biggest seller.
And it fits a number of different guns.
Yeah, we've made that because that's an older product. We have to make new molds every time we want to make a new inlet, right? So we have a mold for the Remington 700s, we have a mold for the Savage, and we have a mold for the Tikka. So we offer in those 3 different rifles right now. Nothing beyond that, though.
And you're gonna have to let me know when this new one comes out.
Okay, I have no problem doing that.
Because I've got a Christensen that needs new butts. Well, it doesn't need anything. To be fair, nobody ever needs any of this shit.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
We're gonna buy it, so it doesn't matter. Thanks for coming today. I gotta go get ready for this next one. But yeah, this is great, man. Really, I love your products. Used it before. You guys are the only ones that make a pad that makes sense to me, to be honest. That doesn't. There's so much weird shit. I was just looking at some like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was one of those ones that has little springs in the middle of it.
Yeah.
It's like, there's no way that's necessary. I can understand it. So Knox makes a buttstock for a 12 gauge for the M2 Combat, and what's the other one? The Mossberg SPX 940, I think, that absorbs most of the recoil. I'm like, that's a buffer spring. That makes sense. But this is a goddamn hunting rifle.
Yeah, it's not necessary. I think it's just trying to look cool, or I don't know. It's not necessary at all.
Yeah. Anyways, I appreciate you coming today and talking about all this stuff. I'm really looking forward to that new product that's coming out. When you think of a name for it, let me know.
Yeah, we'll do.
This show will come out in like two or 3 weeks from now, so maybe you'll have a name by then.
It'll be close. We might, like I said, April 30th is our goal to launch date, but we'll see.
Sweet, man. Well, thanks for coming today. I really appreciate the time.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and good luck with the Bass Pro thing.
Yeah, I
appreciate that. They're easy to deal with, actually.
Are they really?
Yeah. The only it's just layers and layers, but it's a long process, but not a difficult, and that's been my experience.
Well,
going to the middle of Columbia, Missouri.
It's Springfield.
It's like 45 minutes, I think, from Columbia, something like that. We've flown to Columbia.
I've never been to Columbia.
Yeah, that's where the university is. Yeah, Mizzou. Yeah, it's that part is what it is. You gotta go kiss that ring. So. Yeah, good luck with all that. It'll be fun. And thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find you and all your products and whatnot.
Yeah, grayboe.com, grayboe.com. That's it. You go on the website. We have social media, Instagram. All of our handles are Grayboe, grayboe, Instagram /Grayboe, Facebook. I have a podcast, Ryan McMillan Show. So, just look us up, and that's it.
Sweet, man. Well, thanks for coming today. I appreciate it. Have fun in Texas. Weather varies.
Yes.
Right now, but it's pretty nice today.
It's nice today.
So we'll see how it goes. And thank you all for listening. This has been City.